Alright, hello and welcome, fellow users of the internet. My name is Noah, and you're watching Asphodel Merchants. Alright, everybody, it's that time of year again, and Wilds of Eldraine has been fully spoiled. And so it's time for me to do another tier list video. Hopefully you guys saw some of the ones in Lord of the Rings, but if you didn't, basically I'm just going to try and show you what the good cards are going to be in this limited format instead of just telling you about it. And starting off, we've got ourselves a bit of a doozy. Ashiok, Wicked Manipulator. 3 colorless, black for a legendary planeswalker, Ashiok. She starts off with 5 loyalty, and if I would pay life... Wait a minute. Yeah, if you would pay life while your library has at least that many cards in it, exile that many cards from the top of your library instead. It's not a may, you always have to do it. Alright. +1, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Exile one of them and put the other into your hand. -2, create 2 black nightmare creature tokens with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if a card was put into exile this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And -7, target player exiles the top X cards of their library, where X is the total mana value of cards you own in exile. Let's see if I can scroll one more time. Ugh, that's so much. But, alright. We're going to go ahead... Oh, okay, it leaves them there. And put Ashiok in A+. And I'll explain the tiers a little bit. A+ are cards that really should be in your deck. If you're playing sealed and you don't put these in your deck will be noticeably worse, but they're not auto-includes, I don't guess. They're must-picks in draft, yada, yada, yada. A's are only slightly worse. They're very good cards. They're very good reasons to be in those colors. They're powerful cards that help you win the game and help you to stop losing the game. B, again, are cards that are only a little bit worse. Later picks, they help show you that a color is open in draft, and they really do have the ability to affect games, but not as powerful as A's. C's are just your bread and butter creatures. The vast majority of your deck a lot of the time is going to be made up of C's. They're nothing to write home about, but they are definitely the cards you have to have in your deck to win games. D's are cards you should probably avoid having in your deck. They're normally a little inefficient, but you might just end up having to have a couple of them for niche purposes. And of course, F's are F's. You shouldn't have them in your deck. They actively make your deck worse, and you should avoid them at pretty much all costs. Alright, next up we have Ashiok's Reaper. Go ahead and... Alright, that looks good enough for me. Ashiok's Reaper, 3 colorless and a black. For a creature nightmare, it's a 3/3. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. I think that this card is just a B. It's a pretty powerful effect, but there's no guarantee that you can put an enchantment into your graveyard the same turn you play this, on turn 4, unless you wait until a couple turns later and try and have this set up with the mana to sacrifice something at the same time, but that seems like a lot of work. So there are going to unfortunately be a decent amount of times where you play this as your Hill Giant, they kill it, and it happens. Hill Giant's still a serviceable magic card nowadays, which is why I'm giving it a B. Alright, next up we have Back 4 Seconds. 2 colorless and a black for a sorcery. It has the new bargain mechanic. Bargain. You may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. If this spell was bargain, you may put one of those creatures with mana value 4 or less onto the battlefield instead of putting in your hand. This card's really good. I'm going to give it a B. I think it's a card called Soul Harvest is this card that we've seen before without the bargain, and that card's always been an overperformer in Limited. Getting to get rid of one of our low mana value items and turn it into a 4 mana value creature in our graveyard is really good. Next up we have Borrow Naughty, colorless and a black for a creature fairy. It's got flying. Borrow Naughty has lifelink as long as you control another fairy. 2 colorless and a black. Borrow Naughty gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and it's a 1/3. This card is a D. I do not think it's very good at all. The stats are just pretty ineffective. Having a 1 power lifelinker is not all that amazing. And having to pay 3 mana to pump it is just yuck. Alright, next up we've got a mythic rare. One color, Beseech the Mirror. One colorless and black, black, black. Good luck casting it most of the time. It's a sorcery with Bargain. We just read that. Search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If this spell was bargained, you may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost. If that spell mana value is 4 or less, put the exile card into your hand if it wasn't cast this way. I am also going to give this card a D because it is very hard to cast, and if you don't bargain this card at all, it's really not that good. And even with the bargain ability, I think your best bet is tutoring up a removal spell to help you from not dying. Even tutoring up your best 4-drop threat is probably not going to be that good. So I just think this card's not going to perform very well. I'm giving it a D. Candy Grapple, on the other hand, is a different story. This is one heck of a magic card. One colorless and a black for an instant with Bargain. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. If this spell was Bargain, that creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. This card is an A. You are going to want all the copies of Candy Grapple you can get. We've seen all kinds of colorless black target creature gets -2/-2 cards, and they've always been super good and really overperformed. Now they've bumped it up to -3/-3 for no additional cost, and the bargain to just be able to make it -5/-5 and kill their 5 and 6 mana creatures is just off the charts. Candy Grapple is a great card. Looking forward to casting it. Alright, next up we have Conceited Witch. It's 2 colorless and a black for a 2/3 with Menace. It's a creature, a human warlock, and it also is our first card to have Adventure on it. And so this card also can be cast for 1 black as a sorcery with an adventure, and you create a Wicked Roll token and attach it to the target creature you control. Rolls are an aura. Allow me to explain what an adventure is. You then exile this card, and you may cast the creature later from exile, and that's how the adventure part works. You cast the sorcery, this card goes into exile, the creature part goes into exile, and you may cast it later, or even on the same turn. I didn't also realize this is the first time we've read about the roll tokens, and the roll tokens are token aura enchantments that you attach to your creatures, and they do a certain thing, and a creature can only have 1 roll on it at a time. Hopefully we'll read one with the full reminder text on it here in a minute. Alright, but Conceited Witch is just going to be a C. A lot of the time the adventure cards are very good, but this one's not very impactful. 1 black just for a Wicked Roll token is really not that much, and a 2/3 Menace isn't going to be affecting your games all that much. So, a C for Conceited Witch. Alright, next up we have Dream Spoilers. 3 colorless and a black for a creature fairy warlock 2/2. It's got flying, and whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, up to 1 target creature an opponent control gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So the fairies deck does have a lot of instants and sorceries to choose from. Well, I guess only instants is what we're meant by Dream Spoilers, because it has to happen on your opponent's turn. I'm not a huge fan of this card. I almost want to give it a D, but I do think it's going to be a little bit better than that, maybe. If you ever get to kill something with Dream Spoilers just casting an instant, you're going to be way up in value. However, paying 4 mana for just a 2/2 flyer is going to be pretty vulnerable, and it's going to die a lot of the time sometimes, but I think we'll still call it a C for now. If you wanted to value it at a D, you'd probably not be incorrect. So moving on, we have Ego Drain. 1 black for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. If you don't control a fairy, exile a card from your own hand. This card's an F. It is terrible. trust me. Do not put this card in your limited deck. It will never work out quite right. Even if you play something like this 1-drop fairy and then into this Ego Drain on turn 2, it's just not going to be that good a lot of the time, and the fail rate of you draw this and you don't have a fairy, it's just going to be a disaster. Like, this card's terrible. Do not put it in your deck. I swear. Alright, next up we have The End. Teehee. 2 colorless and 2 black for an instant. This spell costs 2 less to cast if your life total is 5 or less. Probably flavor text, but it could come up. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Already an A. I'll go ahead and finish reading it, but this card's already an A. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Search its controller's library and hand for any number of cards with the same name and as that permanent and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. Yeah, you, this control hand. They're probably not going to have that many copies of whatever you kill, but if you do get rid of them, you probably actually, ironically, won't want to exile them because you don't want them to draw more cards. That's just card disadvantage, but just paying 4 mana to exile target creature planeswalker, just chef's kiss. You're going to play it all the time. Alright, next up we have Ariet's Whispers. 3 colorless and a black for a sorcery. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Create a wicked roll token attached to up to 1 target creature you control. And so here's the oracle text on the rolls. If you control another roll, if another on it, put that card into the graveyard. Enchanted creatures get +1/+1 when this aura is put into the graveyard. Each opponent loses 1 life. I think this is another D. You know, there are good mind rot formats and there are bad mind rot formats, so that might take a little time to tell, but costing 4, this seems a little mana inefficient to me. Paying an extra colorless to get one of this roll tokens doesn't really seem effective to me. I'm going to give this card a D for right now. Alright, next up we've got Fairy Dream Thief. 1 black. For a creature fairy warlock, it's a 1/1. It's got flying. When Fairy Dream Thief enters the battlefield, surveil 1. Surveils look at the top card of your library, you may put it in your graveyard. It's got also 2 colorless and a black. Exile Fairy Dream Thief from your graveyard. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. Am I going to be too much giving this card an A? Perhaps. I kind of want to give this card an A. Being a 1/1 is not very efficient in just closing out the game, but 1 mana flyers for 1 is normally pretty good, and eventually you can suicide it to pay this ability and draw a card, or chump block if they get a bigger flyer and then draw your card. Card seems really good. I'm pretty sure you're going to be happy with it pretty much every time you cast it. Solid B, possibly an A even for Fairy Dream Thief. Alright, next up we have Fairy Fencing. X and a black. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. That creature gets an additional -3/-3 until end of turn if you control a fairy as you cast this spell. Don't need much explanation. This card's an A. It scales as the game goes later. As long as you are not very behind in mana with your opponent, you're going to be killing whatever they play. And if you can resolve a fairy, something like our Dream Thief here, and just have 1 black as -3/-3, you're going to just absolutely obliterate your opponent. There's no doubt about it. Alright, next up we have Feed the Cauldron. 2 colorless and a black. Destroy target creature with mana value 3 or less. If it's your turn, create a food token. I was going to put this in A, but I think now I've talked myself into putting it in B. I am going to put it in the first rung of B. If you valued it as an A, it's probably also an A in Sealed, to be completely fair. In Sealed, you're going to value this as an A because you're going to be a little bit more desperate for removal. Because only being able to kill things with mana value 3 or less is quite a hindrance. and getting a spotted food token is good, but it's not going to save you whenever you come face to face with something that's really killing you. But it's still a pretty good B. Alright, next up we have Fell Horseman, 3 colorless and a black. For a creature, Zombie Knight, when Fell Horseman dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library, and it's a 3/3, but it also has Deathly Ride, colorless and a black for a sorcery adventure. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This is a C, good bread and butter card. You're probably going to be happy enough with it most of the time you play it. Alright, next up we have a rare, Gumdrop Poisoner, 2 colorless and a black for a creature human warlock. She's a 3/2 with lifelink. When Gumdrop Poisoner enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. And she's also gotten Adventure, that's an instant, it's called Tempt with Treats, and it's create a food token. So worst comes to worst, you play this on about turn 5, where you sacrifice a food token, this comes into play, and then target creature gets -3/-3. Really, really good. This is definitely an A, and it's probably trending towards A+. It probably wouldn't be too outrageous for me to put this in A+, because it's so efficient, but we'll see. We'll see. Alright, next up we have High Fae Negotiator, 3 colorless and black for a creature fairy warlock with flying and bargain. And when Fairy Negotiator enters the battlefield, if it was bargain, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. And this is also a 3/5, in case I didn't mention it. I think this card is also an A. Yeah, I think it's fine. They're an A. Doesn't really matter what order it is in A, but it could. Who knows? I think this card is just really efficient. You'd always be happy pretty much with a 5-mana 3/5 flyer and the ability to just have an extra Lightning Helix on, well, each opponent. What would that card have been called? Essence Drain, I think, only hit players. No, Essence Drain hit creatures too. Well, Lightning Helix for players only is still pretty good. I like me some High Fae Negotiator. Alright, next up, we have Hopeless Nightmare. 1 black for an enchantment. When Hopeless Nightmare enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life. When Hopeless Nightmare is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you scry 2 and pay 2 colorless and a black, sacrifice Hopeless Nightmare. I think this card's really good. What am I putting it in? I think it's in limited. I think it's only going to play like a C, but I could see it coming up a lot in some pick orders. I'm actually going to put it in the top end to C. I just really think it's efficient. Just as 1 black, each opponent loses 2 life. That reads a lot more powerful than you'd think a lot of the time. And with all these bargain creatures, you're going to be looking for stuff like this to sacrifice that, have already gotten their value and are just waiting around to be used up to make your other cards better. I think Hopeless Nightmare is going to be a fine addition in most of your decks. I'm excited to play with it. It's also going to be a Pauper All-Star. So moving on, we've got Lich's Knight's Conquest. Lich Knight's Conquest. 4 colorless and a black for a sorcery. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantment, and or tokens. Return that many cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card has probably definitely got the text of will always make my deck and will probably never be as good as I think it is. I should probably put it in like D or F, but this is very powerful. For like 5 mana Zombify has been begrudgingly playable in some formats. I don't know how good we're going to be putting creature cards we want to reanimate into our graveyard in this format. But you can also, like, being able to get multiple creatures back in a turn could be really important. Maybe putting in C is fair. The upside is definitely there, but I can also see this card being just a straight up blank a lot of your games. So we're just going to leave it at C for Lich Knight's Conquest. Alright, next up we have Lord Skitter Sewer King. 2 colorless and a black for a legendary creature, Rat Noble. Whenever another rat enters the battlefield under your control, exile up to 1 target card from an opponent's graveyard. Alright. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. I think it is going to be fair to call Lord Skitter's an A. Yeah, not quite an A+. I think I know what other A+ I'm looking for in this format, and this is not quite there. 3/3 is really good, but more dealable than you'd think. We've already seen plenty of cards that can deal that deal with 3/3s pretty well, and getting spotted a rat token every turn is pretty sweet though. So we're gonna go with A for this. Next up, we've got Lord Skitter's Blessing. We've got 1 colorless and a black for an enchantment. When Lord Skitter enters when this card enters the battlefield, create a Wicked Roll token attached to target creature I control. At the beginning of your draw step, if you control an enchanted creature, you lose 1 life and draw an additional card. I think I'm actually only going to give this card a B. It is pretty good, but if they go ahead and bite the bullet and kill your enchanted creature and you don't get a card off of this card is going to be pretty poopy. It is very powerful, though. I'm definitely probably not cutting it from my black decks, but you can see this card falling behind. Okay, next up we have Lord Skitter's Butcher. 2 colorless and a black for a 2/3 rat peasant. When Lord Skitter's Butcher enters the battlefield, choose 1. Create a 1/1 black rat token that can't block. You may sacrifice another creature. If you do, scry 2, then draw a card. And creatures you control gain menace until end of turn. This is a very solid B. I could probably even see this deck trending towards A. Iron Urn and Iron Urn. I am just not enunciating well. Diction is done with the tip of the tongue and the teeth. But yeah, good B. You're going to be happy pretty much anytime you cast this card. If you evaluated A, I don't think you'd be incorrect. Moving on, we have Monstrosity. 1 colorless and a black for a creature horror. It's a 3/1, and when Monstrosity dies, create a food token. A C, a good bread and butter card. 3/1 has been a weird stat line for some time in Magic, but with this, when it dies, create a food token synergy. I'm going to be pretty happy with it. Alright, next up we have Not Dead After All. 1 black for an instant until end of turn. Target creature you control gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Then create a Wicked Roll token attached to it. I am just going to give this card an F. This card has not been this kind of card. You know, Undying Evil, Undying Malice, Feign Death have not really been good performers in Limited, and I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. So we're going to start this card out at F. However, do note that this is almost a strict upgrade for Rakdos Scam in Modern, so I will be picking up a playset. Alright, next up we have another rare that I do not know what to think about quite yet. 2 colorless and black for Rankle's Prank. Sorcery. Choose 1 or more. Each player discards 2 cards. Each player loses 4 life. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So the thing, like, this all seems really bad, but I think if you put in a little bit of work and work out the timing, the hardest part is probably that each player discards 2 cards. This is only going to be pretty effective if you get to being hellbent and your opponent still has 1 or 2 cards and you choose this mode, then it'll be okay, but it's probably the hardest setup. Each player losing 4 life, you're going to have to hope to be the aggressor in this or have the ability to gain some more life to make up for it on your side. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures, however, could be pretty interesting because, like, let's just say you know you have a creature and you have this in your hand. Your opponent go ahead and main phases the creature they're going to cast this turn for some reason, and they attack. So you just make the chump block and then just pick that each player sacrifices 2 creatures when you know you don't have any. And that could be pretty effective. I'm probably going to be wrong. and this card's probably going to play worse than I think it is, but it just does so much and gives you so many options that I'm going to put it in B, and I am going to be excited to see how it plays out and to hear what any experience you guys might have with it. Alright, next up we have Rat Out, 1 black. For an instant, up to 1 target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. You create a 1/1 black rat creature token that can't block. Hold this for me. Swarm Piper. I'm going to give this card a C. However, I will say, anytime you ever get to snipe off your opponent's like 2/1 or 3/1 with this, you are going to just feel just chef's kiss, you know. You're just on the draw. They go land. You go take my draw, play my swamp. They go land, play a 1 toughness creature, kill it, steal back the play, and get a threat. It's just going to feel so backbreaking. Alright, next up we've got Rowan's Grim Search. 2 colorless and a black for an instant. It's got Bargain. If this spell was bargained, look at the top 4 cards of your library, then put up to 2 of them back on top of your library in any order and rest into your graveyard, and then you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Okay, that might have read a little awkward for anybody who's just listening to this. So it's always 2 colorless and a black, and at instant speed, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Pretty okay. We've played this kind of card before. It's normally alright. And if you bargain it, then you get to look at the top 4 cards of your library and put up to 2 of them back and the rest into your graveyard. So this is just a C. Good card advantage spell. You're going to be okay having one of these in most of your decks. It's nothing all that exciting though. Okay, and next up we have Scream Puff. 4 colorless and a black for a creature horror. It's a 4/5 and it's got Death Touch. And it also says when Scream Puff deals combat damage to a player, create a food token. This card is another C. It is fine. 5 mana for a 4/5 is okay. With Death Touch, you know, it's funny. The bigger creatures get, the less good they are with Death Touch, but neither here nor there exactly. It's still a fine addition to the card. Too much sugar is bad for your health. Thank you, Wizards. And getting a food token off of combat damage is relevant. Also note that in case you didn't know, making food and doing stuff with food is Green-Black's archetype, and just having tokens and gaining life is part of White-Black's. You'll figure out the archetypes as we go along. Alright, next up is Shatter the Oath. 3 colorless, black for a sorcery, destroy target creature or enchantment, create a wicked roll token attached to up to 1 target creature you control. Yeah, B is a fine place for this, for our begrudgingly playable removal spell. You're always going to put in your deck. You're not going to be able to cut it pretty much unless you're in draft and your draft is insanely good. You're always going to play it. It's going to do well enough even though you're going to want it to be better. Alright, next up we have Spectre of Mortality. 3 colorless, black. Flying. When Spectre of Mortality enters the battlefield, you may exile 1 or more creature cards from your graveyard. When you do, each other creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards exiled this way. Okay, I think this card is really good. How good do I think it is? Okay, I'm thinking about A+ for a minute. Because, like, getting to play, like, you know, 5... Like, imagine you are able to exile, like, 4 creature cards from your graveyard, and then just Plague Wind the board, and just you be left with a 3/3, and your opponent doesn't have much. Do you have any other A+? Like, oh man, I'm such a dork, I can't figure out how to scroll down a list. I'm going to leave it in A+ for right now. But it's probably a little bit more correct to put it in as A, because it is symmetrical. You are killing some of your own stuff, but I imagine you're also going to be blocking to set up having more creatures to exile. And so that's where I'm at on thinking about this card right now. if you want to evaluate it different, prove me wrong. I don't know. Alright, next up we have Spiteful Hexmage. 1 black for a creature human warlock. It's a 3/2. When Spiteful Hexmage enters the battlefield, create a cursed roll token attached to target creature you control. The cursed roll token makes enchanted creature a 1/1, so it's a turn to frog. I am not very high on this card at all. If you try to play it on turn 1, it attaches the curse roll to itself, so it's a 1-mana 1/1 with no other text. And even if you go through the work of putting this on one of your own 1/1s to make it 3/2, stats by themselves are not good enough to really make cards good and limited anymore. It is not. They've got to have some kind of card advantage or some kind of life gain, increased board presence. I'm going to give this card a D. It's probably at the top end of D. If you played it like a C, you probably wouldn't be wrong. But I'm just not sure that I'm impressed with this card at all. There are probably going to be some decks that are going to be able to go okay, Hexmage, turn 2, good 2-mana bargain card, attack for 3. And in those games, it's going to be really impressive. But even later in the game, it's not going to top deck very well. I'm not super impressed with this card. Alright, next up we have Stingblade Assassin. 3 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a fairy assassin. It's a 3/1. It's got flash and flying. When Stingblade Assassin enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. We've seen this kind of ability on cards before, and it's normally pretty good. I'm going to put this in the higher end of C. It's not always going to work out, but your fail case scenario of having a 4-mana 3/1 flash flyer, you can ambush some creatures. You won't be all that disappointed with trading with it that way. And being a fairy is a relevant creature type, as we've already seen. Alright, next up we've got Sugar Rush. 1 colorless and a black. For an instant, target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Draw a card. I smell frosting. Ready weapons. Part of me is getting the instinct that this is just a D. You can always... There is always the fail case if you can target your opponent's a creature on your turn to get a redraw off of it, but that's not very exciting. And like I said, just raw stats normally aren't enough to make a card good, so the +3/+0 flavor text. Getting a redraw is okay, but maybe this card will surprise me, but I doubt it. Alright, this card, however, is going to be pretty good. Sweet Tooth Witch. 2 colorless and a black for a human warlock. When Sweet Tooth Witch enters the battlefield, create a food token. 2 colorless, sacrifice of food. Target player loses 2 life, and it's a 3/2 in case I didn't mention it. This card's a C. Pretty good C. It's well stated for a 3-drop. Making the food's going to be relevant. You're going to need tokens. You're going to want to gain life. And in a pinch, maybe it can help you use your foods to burn them out. Alright, next up, we've got Taken by Nightmares. 2 colorless, black for an instant. Exile target creature. If you control an enchantment, scry 2. There's an A. Get up to A. You're always going to play it. It's always going to be good. Take it whenever you find it. Play it whenever you open it. It's always going to be good. Alright, next up we have Tangled Colony. Colorless and a black for a creature. It's a rat. Tangled Colony can't block. When Tangled Colony dies, create X 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature can't block, where X is the amount of damage to it this turn. So you just play it and you always suicide it and you get some extra rats whenever they block. I would assume most of the time this is going to give you 2 rats, and that's going to be pretty good. I am going to give Tangled Colony an A, but mostly because I love all the rat cards, and we're going to see some more of them. Oh man, okay, don't click your keyboards too hard over this, because I'm about to drop some spice. Twisted Sewer Witch. 3 colorless, black for a creature human warlock. When Twisted Sewer Witch enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. And then for each rat you control, create a Wicked Roll token attached to that rat. And we've read the Wicked Rolls. Oh baby, I don't know how many rats you have to be good, but This thing by itself is, 5-6 worth of stats. And I talked about how stats aren't good enough to make cards good, but it's getting pretty close. If you control like 2 other rats and you've made them 2/2s, like I'm fantasizing a little bit too hard about just, like building this small army of rats with, just the commons and uncommons and then slamming this on 5, and now you just have like 5 2/2s. When they die, they lose a life. I'm giving Twisted Sewer Witch an A+. I think this is one of the best uncommon defines. It is a build-around. This is a build-around grade, I will have to say. By itself, if you had 0 other rat synergies, she'd only be like a C or a D. But if you have any other rat synergies and can get this into red-black, this card's going to be an absolute powerhouse. I'm giving it an A+. Alright, we've got another really good card, probably going to be... Yep, we've got Virtue of Persistence. 5 colorless, black. For an enchantment, at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Now, I would normally tell you that this is a silly commander card. You're not really going to win the game by casting a 7 mana enchantment and hoping to untap with it. Your opponent's just going to kill you. However, this card has an adventure. Locthwain Scorn. 1 colorless and a black for a sorcery. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. You're never going to cut Locthwain Scorn from your deck. It's always going to be good. There's always probably going to be something relevant for you to kill. If it's too big, you can attack, and then after they make the appropriate block, then you finish it off. And so you're never going to cut Locthwain Scorn from your black deck, so you just always kind of get to have Virtue of Persistence for free. And I said it's not going to win you a game a lot of the time, but some of the time, if you're playing the game well, and you get to resolve this and then start getting the best creature that's died every turn back forever, it's going to mount up. I'm giving an A+ to Virtue of Persistence. Alright, next up we have Voracious Vermin. 2 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a rat. It's a 2/1, and it has whenever this card enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black rat token that can't block. And whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Voracious Vermin. And that's not only once each turn, it's every time it dies. This is probably just a C. You get to slam this on turn 3 if they have the removal spell. They have the removal spell. That's just Magic sometimes. But you are going to want this card because you're probably going to be suiciding your rats into your opponent most of the time because they can't block. If they're not attacking, they're really not doing anything. But you're going to be trying to build up Voracious Vermin to where it's big enough to take up the battlefield. That's just the cards rolling the game. Hopefully, it'll continue to do well. Alright, next up we have Warehouse Tabby. 1 black for a creature cat. It's a 1/1. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 black rat creature token that can't block, and pay 1 colorless and a black. Warehouse Tabby gains Death Touch until end of turn. Paying 2 to gain Death Touch is kind of a lot, but it'll probably come up and be okay. We do have Bargain, so an enchantment being put into your graveyard from play to make the rat tokens is probably going to be more relevant than I think it is, but I still think that even though 1-drops have gotten better in modern day limited, this might not be one of them. It just feels a little low impact to me. I'm only giving a D to Warehouse Tabby. Alright, next up we've got Wicked Visitor. 1 colorless and a black for a nightmare. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. It's a 2/2. This is probably a C. Am I going to put it in B? No. Okay, it's still just a C. It is a 2-drop with a good relevant ability. It could, if you're really bargaining up a storm, it'll probably play as a B, but we'll just have to see. Alright, next up we've got The Witch's Vanity. This is our first saga. It costs 1 and a black. If you've never seen a saga before or haven't read it, sagas enter the battlefield, and when they enter the battlefield, you put the first lore counter on it, and you get to do the first ability. And after you draw your card in your draw step each turn, you get another lore counter to do the next abilities. And the first one is destroy target creature an opponent controls with mana value 2 or less. Chapter 2, create a food token. And Chapter 3, create a Wicked Roll token attached to target creature you control. I feel like this card probably was originally designed to have read ahead, the mechanic from Dominaria United, and then they just weren't going to have read ahead at all anymore. But, you know, whatever. This card ends up doing a lot. I don't know how much mana I would put into, you know, just creating the roll token, creating the food token. Those two together are like questionably 2 mana. But if you do actually get to destroy the creature, I'm going to go ahead and call Witch's Vanity a B. If you actually get to destroy the creature, it's going to work out just fine. Alright, so continuing, I made the executive decision that these cards up here, although they are listed in the gold section on Gatherer and whatnot, that I was going to just put the colors that they are as the creatures in the enchantments in their colored review, because I highly doubt that you're going to just be putting the adventure parts in the adventure colored decks. I could be wrong, but I doubt it, and as I read them, you'll probably agree. And so starting off with Devouring Sugarmoth, 2 colorless and black. For a creature horror, menace, and trample, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token. If you don't, tap Devouring Sugarmoth. Some real Desecration Demon vibes, and it's a 6/6, by the way, in case I didn't say that. And it's got an adventure, colorless and a white for an instant, have for dinner, create a 1/1 white human creature token, and a food token. I'm going to put this in A+. I think this is a good reason to be in black. I think it's going to kill your opponents a lot of the time. If you can actually cast the adventure part, either off a splash or you're in white and black, this card is going to be really good. And even without it, I don't think it's going to be that hard to have enough things to always be able to sacrifice, because things like Hopeless Nightmare and the roll tokens are all things you can sacrifice, and food. I think this card's always going to be an overperformer. And another thing, you can always block with it the turn you cast it. You play it as a 6/6, they have something, maybe they go for attacks, and you make the blocks knowing that you don't have that much stuff to sacrifice, and they 2-for-1 themselves trying to kill it. Still going to be worth it. Alright, next up, we have Callous Sellsword. Colorless and a black for a creature human soldier. It's a 2/2. Callous Sellsword enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that died under your control this turn. And it's also got an adventure. 1 red for Burn Together. It's a sorcery. It says, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to any other target, then sacrifice it. Like I said, I really don't think you're going to be putting Burn Together, this card, in your deck just to cast Burn Together in your red deck without the ability to cast Sellsword. But with that being said, I think I'm going to give Callous Sellsword a B. It's a very efficient creature, and if you can cast the red part of the card, it's pretty powerful. They'll probably like Curse Roll something and you sacrifice it, deal damage. Sacrifice one of your creature tokens that, you know, didn't have much mana value to destroy one of their threats, and then get yourself a 3/3 to replace it. So, good old B for Callous Sellsword. Alright, next up we have Cruel Somnophage. I'm going to read that one more time. Cruel Somnophage. Yeah, because it's a dream phage, dream nightmare, whatever. Colorless and a black for a creature is a nightmare. Cruel Somnophage power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. And it's got an adventure, Can't Wake Up for a colorless and a blue. It's a sorcery. Target player mills 4 cards. Like I said, really doubt you're going to put Cruel Somnophage in your blue deck just for half of a Mind Sculpt. But just as the power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards, really good, efficient threat. It's always going to go in your black deck. It's an A. Alright, next up we've got Spellsworn Coven. 3 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a fairy warlock. It's got flying, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. It's also got an adventure, 2 colorless and a black for an instant. Return target spell to its owner's hand. Do I want to give this card a D? I don't think it's very good at all. You know, just a minuscule flyer makes them discard a card. They're probably going to be out of card. No. I'm still going to put it in C. It's probably a very high C, admittedly. It's going to do a little bit more than I give it credit for. And if you can actually cast the blue part, it'll probably perform pretty well. Alright, so that's the end of the regular cards. In case you did not know, there is a bonus sheet in this set, similar to the Mystical Archives in Strixhaven, or the Multiverse Legends that we just saw in March of the Machines. These cards are going to be extra cards in the packs, but they're not going to be legal in Standard. There's going to be one in every pack, and part of them will be black, like the ones we see here. And I made the executive decision to put the bonus sheet colored cards in their color section. If you don't like it, make your own tier list video and show me how it went. And first up, we have Bitter Blossom. 1 colorless and a black for a tribal enchantment fairy. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying. Card's an A+. It's mega good. It's Bitter Blossom was an amazing card when it was in Standard all the way back in Lorwyn, and I'm sure it's been amazing in the limited formats I've not got to play in. A+ for Bitter Blossom. Alright, next up we have Dark Tutelage. 2 colorless and a black. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card in your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. Paying 1 to 2 life to draw a card isn't that bad. This, however, is quite a lot. If you don't end up killing them, this card's going to deal you way more damage than I think you were expecting. I'm going to give Dark Tutelage an F. I don't think you want to play it. Alright, next up we have Grave Pact. By the way, sorry if you bought any Grave Packs recently. They've gotten so many reprints. Welcome to the TCG world. Alright, colorless, black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. This card is hard to cast, but it is really good. Your opponent will never really be able to get past parity with you in terms of the creatures. It doesn't affect the board immediately, but it will eventually. I'm going to give an A to Grave Pact. Alright, next up we've got Leyline of the Void, 2 colorless and black for an enchantment. If Leyline of the Void is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. If a creature card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. This card's an F. Your opponent, probably 6 out of 10 times, isn't going to have any graveyard synergies at all, and paying 4 mana just to try and mess with those synergies is nothing. Even getting to start with it for 0 mana is a little unimportant. This is an F. You don't need to prioritize it at all. Alright. Next up we have Necropotence. Black, triple black for an enchantment. Skip your draw step. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. Pay 1 life. Exile the top card of your library face down. Put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. Necropotence at least has that it is $20 going for it, so there is that. If you're in draft, maybe take it. Sorry, at the recording of this video, it's $20. You might take it in a draft. It's probably going to go down, so maybe not have that be the only reason. I'm going to leave it in D. I could see some decks really abusing this, but not all that likely. So, I'm putting it in D. Prove me wrong, I guess. If you know how to play with Necropotence and break it, go ahead and do it. But I don't think this card's going to be that impressive. Alright, next up we have Oppression. 1 colorless, black for an enchantment. Oh man, whenever I first read this card, I thought it was going to be so good, but then I reread it and realized how bad it is. Whenever a player casts a spell, that player discards a card. This card's an F. You're not going to want to card disadvantage yourself. Even if you could slam this on turn 2, your opponent will just play their spells and discard a land, and it won't work out most of the time. Because eventually you'll both be hellbent, and then you'll be on a race to top deck stuff, and if they top deck better than you, it's going to be embarrassing. So I'm going to give Oppression an F. Next up, we have Oversold Cemetery, 1 colorless and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 more creature cards in your graveyard, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I am also going to give an F to Oversold Cemetery. It was not very impressive in Dominaria Remastered Limited. Maybe it could change, but at this moment in time, I am not impressed with this card at all. Alright, next up we have 3 colorless, black for Polluted Bonds. It's an enchantment. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. I think this card's only a D. I'm sure it's really good in Commander or whatever, but in this format, I don't think, like, your opponent will just stop playing lands. Like, I don't know how many of their decks are really going to need very many more than that. And if they're low in life, they just won't play them, and it's not killing them. And this is also 5 mana that doesn't affect the board. They're just going to have another turn of good attacks after this. I'm really not that impressed with this card, but I could be wrong. Alright, next up, we have a different story. We got Stab Wound. 2 colorless and a black for an enchantment. Aura, enchanted creature gets -2/-2, and at the beginning of your upkeep... At the beginning of the upkeep of enchanted player's control, that player loses 2 life. This card... I don't think I'm going to give it an A. I could, though. This is a B trending towards A. Stab Wound, very good card. If you got to play with it in Return to Ravnica, you remember that this card will kill a lot of people. You put this on like their 1/1 or their 0/1. It essentially makes their creature an auto chump blocker because they don't want to keep taking the life from this. Or if you put it on like their 3/3 and now they have a 1/1, you always just let it swing in and you let this kill them over time. It's a pretty good, pretty efficient card. Okay, next up we have Sanguine Bond. 3 colorless and black. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Okay, so we've got food in this set, and so because of that, that makes me feel like, Sanguine Bond could maybe be an overperformer. I'm going to put Sanguine Bond in C because it is definitely only on a build-around grade. I think you can only probably have this card in either black-green or black-white, where you're making a lot of foods or have a few creatures with lifelink. Outside of that, I think this card is going to be pretty disappointing. You definitely need to know how many gain life triggers you're going to have in the deck, and if the number's not high enough, it's going to trend lower. If you've got enough, it's going to tend higher. But also, I've got some fond memories of casting Sanguine Bond in Modern back when I was a high schooler and didn't know how Modern decks work. Alright, next up we have Vampiric Rites. 1 black. Sacrifice for an enchantment, pay 1 colorless and a black. Sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. I think this card kind of... Well... I'm going to put it in C. This is probably a C or a D. Oh, man, it's just like... Paying 1 black is not that much. You are affecting the board. I guess if you know that you're going to have creatures that you want to sacrifice, like you're going to make some 1/1s, your opponent's going to attack you, you're going to block, pay this, sack, and get the card advantage, probably going to help. There's a lot of aura-based removal in this deck, so you're going to sacrifice the creature that your opponent... Okay, I'm being talked into it. I'm talking myself into the C on Vampiric Rites. I don't think it's any higher than that, but it is a C. Alright, next up, we got Waste Not. 1 colorless and a black for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent discards a creature card, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, add 2 black. Whenever an opponent discards a non-creature card, a non-creature non-land card, draw a card. Can I get myself to put it in A+? I think I can. I'm probably coping really hard, but Waste Not is one of my favorite cards ever. I've tried to make it work so many times in constructed formats. I saw lots of cards that said discard in black, so maybe you can get just enough. The A plus is also definitely a build around grade. I'll definitely give it that. If you don't have any cards that say discard in your deck, it's not going to be good at all. Okay, now I've talked myself into putting it in A. Public service announcement, like it's only in A. It's probably not that good. It's probably actually not good at all. I should probably put it in C or D, but I can't make myself. So take Waste Not. Make sure to take every single card you see that says discard a card on it to make sure it works. Okay, man, 55 minutes. Ugh. Okay, maybe these videos are too long. It doesn't matter. All right. Thank you, everyone who watched this video. I'm going to have Red coming up very soon. Please like this video. Comment below to say what you think about the tier list and what you're excited about seeing. Good luck at whatever pre-release event you're going to be playing in soon. Hopefully this will help you get some better wins and a higher win percentage. And please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It helps out a ton. I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.